From process to progress, streamlining business systems for success. In this episode, John Tonkin delves into the intricacies of capturing and managing business processes. Discover why involving employees and using visual tools is essential for effective system implementation. Learn how to balance efficiency, quality, and cost while ensuring accessibility and continuous improvement. I'm your co-host Anthony Pearl, and this is the Systems from the Box podcast. Let's start unpacking. John, I wanted to ask you about the end result of the things that you produce, and when people are looking at the idea of capturing systems and putting it out there, what does it actually look like? What is the end result of these things? Is it literally a big bit of paper with we go from here to here to here, or is there something a little bit more elaborate? And obviously technology comes into that as well.
Yeah, typically, if we think of what the end result must be, it must be something that everyone who needs it can access it. And they have to be able to access it in a way that is useful to them. For instance, if we have something that's working in a bakery and we have processes there, there's no point in having them on a touch screen because there's going to be dough or flour or something all over your touch screen by the end of the day. So there it might be a matter of saying, good, we could have them on wipeable posters on the wall or something like that. But it's a matter of making it so that whatever it is, we've got to give them everything they need to use in one place. And we have to make it so that they can be here, follow it all the way through without having to go somewhere else. We don't want somebody getting halfway through a process and then say, oh, I've just got to go to the other room to get this. You see it in cooking shows, and it exhibits exactly what I'm saying. Before they start, they've got these nice little bowls that I don't have at home with here are the shallots, and here's the black pepper, and here's the whatever it is, and here's the marjoram, and here's the something else and something else. And there's the meat all cut up and beautifully cubed and in a bowl. Everything's right there. And then they show you the process of putting it together. And that's a little bit like a good process is. All the bits that you need are reachable, they're within access. And then you follow the process and you get the right result. So that's what we're trying to do. We want to make it so that everything's there. Typically for us, that means that we're putting the processes that we've mapped with the client onto an intranet. On that intranet page, you'll see the flow chart. You will see any text we wanted to add, which could be the whole process in text as well, because we've got the different learning styles. Remember, read, write, people want to read it or write it, and so on. But then below that, we've got the risks and benefits, which are now called the teaching points, because when you're teaching somebody about something, you will often want to say, be careful you don't do this. That's just managing the risk in the process. Make sure if we're going back to that cooking thing, make sure you don't overwork the dough. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a rock and so on. That's a risk that we're managing by telling them that. So we want to have it all in one place where they can go and see the whole process. If they need that background information, remember that policy and stuff that we have over there might be a link to that so you can go and read it. But when they're actually doing it, when they're implementing the process, we want them to be able to go through, start at the top, get to the bottom, have all the tools they need, that script for this or that checklist for this and so on, right there on the page in one place. It's scary to me when I see people who have everything in an intranet, but then the users have to jump out and go into Google Drive or SharePoint and search for the document they use with it. Here's this checklist. Oh no, that's the old one. That's right. Oh, I know the new one's here somewhere. It's got to be right there. Otherwise you're wasting time, losing focus, and it's hard to do.
Yeah. And it is about keeping things in that central way and having it easily accessible. I mean, continuing on from your kind of analogy, and I had this discussion with someone recently where it's interesting how things have a history in a business, and there was a reason why things were set up originally, but then nobody's ever questioned it. So in this particular case, think of it as like a production line, that one thing was sitting at one end purely because, I'm just going to make an assumption here, the PowerPoint was there and the room was set up in that particular way. There was a nice corner where that particular piece of equipment fitted. But then when you look at it now, you go, well, logically, that piece of equipment should be sitting at the other end of the production line. In the meantime, we've got people running from one end to the other, as a result of that, and nobody's ever questioned it, to the extent where I know in this particular business, they were setting up a second location and they were just making the same assumptions of the setup that it has to be the
Mm.
same way, when really the historical reason had everything to do with a PowerPoint in a particular way. A room was figured and a piece of equipment, it just seemed to sit nicely in that corner, had no relevance to what the end result was and hadn't been questioned for years.
Yeah. Yeah, we call that momentum, don't we? I mean, that's where, why are we doing that? Well, we've always done it that way. Yes, but why do you do it that way? I don't know. We've always done, and so on. It's not an answer, it's an excuse. And so that's where, really you come to that point where it would have been really good. We don't need that thing over there just because that's where the PowerPoint was or whatever else, etc. We want to have it the best way each time. And so that's where, we want to build into the process that bit where it is confirm this or check that you have that before you start and so on. But in our systems, there will often be those things that will get there and we're starting to pull them apart. And that comes back to the fear factor we were talking about earlier, where people may have said, oh, you're going to be ripping my process apart, or you're going to be potentially sacking me because we're working on systems. Well, no, really what we're trying to do is just to work out a more effective way of doing this. And sometimes when we're taking that, analyzing that, we realize, you know what, we could actually move this step further forward and that would make it more effective, or we could change this or do that. But we've got to be open to that. And that's where, that openness of thinking that we want to get people to have, that flexibility has to be there. I remember attending a presentation run by Xerox. And in that presentation, they said, we wanted to make sure that everyone in Xerox in New South Wales would make sure that they focused on the client, 100% for the client. And so they said to all the sales reps in Xerox, they said, guys, you can spend whatever it takes to make sure our customers, our clients, are looked after properly. And so if that means you've got to get on a plane or send something out by a plane to Wilcannia instead of using a courier that'll take 3 days to get there, just do it. We want to get there. And so they gave them clear authority to do this. And then they reviewed it 6 months or a year later or whatever it was, quarter later, I don't know how long, a period later. And they discovered that they'd probably spent something like $27.60 or something. No one had used it. And why hadn't they used it? Because they had this thing in their head that says, we mustn't spend money. We must do it the cheapest way. No, they can get it in 3 days. It'll still work. Whereas the whole idea behind the very good policy was, we want our clients to work without interruption. We want, et cetera. You can imagine the rest. But it's just that mindset. And the mindset of the user is something we often have to overcome. And even in the business owner, the same thing. Remember, things are the way they are because they got that way. There's nothing wrong with it. Why do we do that? Oh, well, we used to have a machine that sat there, so that's why this machine is here. It'd probably be better if it was over there now next to the new machine, but we haven't done it. Well, great. Why don't you just think about doing it and so on? And often it's just those little having the authority or having the nerve to change it, I suppose, is where we get some of the improvements in systems when we're working with clients, because they say, yeah, we want you to change it.
Yeah. And I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? That people have to be willing to do that. You look at so many things. I mean, we won't get into the education system, but people often talk about the education system, and it's built off the idea of, decades and decades ago, of the idea of what education should look like. And it's constantly being tinkered with, but it's not actually been pulled apart and gone, we should actually, if we rethought this, how would we actually do it today? And that's a really interesting idea. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, because I remember years ago that Google thought, well, what if we invented email today? What would it look like? And they did try something different and it just didn't work. So people didn't want to take it up. So there's a bit of a understanding, pulling it apart and working out the best way to put it together again, isn't there? Hey, John, I just want to take a break from the main part of the podcast for a moment so you can tell us a little bit more about Brain in a Box.
So Brain in a Box the idea started when I was working in corporate. I was working in a couple of major companies, internationals, and I decided that when I went out and started my first business in 2000, that it was going to use the same principles as I had done in corporate world to capture systems and to make them accessible to the team. But I thought, I've got to be able to do this for small business, small to medium business. And that's what we focus on. So we work with the business owner, with the team, to capture what the business does, and then to minimize the risk by going through and looking at all the risks that we have to manage, make sure we capture those and manage them effectively, and also to achieve the benefit. And then we make all that accessible to the team via an intranet. So that's effectively what it is. Yeah. And that's another point in there. Exactly. When you introduce a new bit of software, you always have a rollback plan. So, we're using software A at the moment. We're going to roll out software B. So we make sure that when we do it, we can do it in a way that will have minimum impact, negative impact on the business as we're doing that. But then we'll also make sure that we have a rollback plan. So we don't kill the old files. We'll archive them and save them there and have them in a form where we can just ghost them straight back onto a hard disk or something and make it all work. But we've got to have that plan that says we are prepared to make changes. We are prepared to break things if we need to, and we will end up getting to the right point, knowing that if we had to, we could have gone back and done that. I remember, I'm not going to get religious here, but it's almost worthwhile looking at this. And there was a statement of the Buddha that says, if on the road to truth and enlightenment, the thing standing in your way is the Buddha, kill the Buddha. And I apologize if I've misquoted that, but that's how I heard it. And I think that's a little bit like the same thing with systems. If, as you're trying to improve systems, you have to break the old system to get the new one working more effectively, be ready to do it. But again, it's not blind smash and bash. It's going to be analyze and look at it a bit first. If we do change it, here's what the new one would look like. How will that impact what you're asking a few questions. You're going in and again, looking at the risks and the benefits to make sure that you don't just throw it away and end up with something that works, but it's a compromise.
Yeah, because it's a big thing, isn't it? There's a difference sometimes between efficiency and quality. They don't always sit on the same page, and you can break something to create more efficiencies. But if you lose that quality, ultimately, whatever you've gained in the efficiency, you might lose in clients who don't appreciate that drop in quality.
Yeah. And we've seen that in business, in industry. We've seen it. I won't say which bank it was, but there was a bank which got rid of a whole pile of consultants, and 40,000 or something of them, I think, was the number. I don't remember the number, and I could well be wrong there. But they got rid of a whole pile of consultants because they were going to do it internally. And then they realized after they had done it that, actually, we need some of those people. So actually, it was employees. They got rid of the team members to engage consultants, And then what they did, once they realized they had got rid of all the brains, then they brought back the old team, but many of them came back as consultants and earned a lot more money. So it sort of backfired. But, you're always looking at what the impact of the change is going to be. And we just talk about TCQ, time, cost, and quality. And it's such an easy thing to look at. We're proposing to change our system for doing this, our process for doing this. And then the next thing should be, how will that impact what we do in terms of time, in terms of cost, and the flip side, profit, and then in terms of quality? Because we want to make sure that we maximize all of those to our benefit, obviously, rather than just do things. This will save time. Yep, it'll save time, all right, but it's costing twice as much, or this will be so much better quality. Yes, but it's going to cost 10 times as much. I'm making my little pencils out of titanium because it's so much better quality. They'll last for 100 years. Good. Which user of those pencils is going to last for 100 years, and so on and so on. You can see all the questions there. But it is just making sure we've got horses for courses, matching the risks and the benefits.
And it's interesting because you look at some pieces of not just technology, but, everyday equipment. People often talk about, well, they don't make fridges like they used to because they used to last 25, 30 years. Now they last, 5 to 7. Why do they last 5 to 7? Well, some people will say, oh, well, it's because there's too much, computer software and technology in there. No, they're building them to last a certain period of time so that you'll go and buy the bigger and better and newer things with the newer technology in it. And it's getting into that cycle. So it's part of you have to look at it strategically, don't you, as a business and saying, what are you trying to achieve here? Because you can do yourself out of a business if you make something such great quality that people aren't going to repurchase again, for 100 years, then
That's right.
okay, well, is that
Yep.
worthwhile?
Exactly. And exactly what you're talking about. I remember watching a documentary some short while ago. It was about these beer glasses in Germany. And the beer glasses in Germany, there was one factory that made them. And the beer glasses, you could pick them up. They were quite thin glass. You could pick them up and drop them on the ground on a beer hall floor and so on, and pick them up. There would be no chips, no cracks, no scratches, and so on. And they lasted for many months and so on. They lasted. They're still being used now and so on. The factory went out of business. The factory sent off its salespeople to America to say, hey, you'd like this, wouldn't you? And of course, they liked the idea of it, but then said, if we have a durable glass, then now we don't get any money out of durability, out of making them, replacing those glasses. We earn money from that and so on. There were a whole pile of things. The company went out of business. You can still buy them on eBay, though. I just can't remember the name of them. But it was really very impressive. And it really took that story to the point where you are analyzing the real world, not the ideal world. In the ideal world, we would have machines that lasted forever, because you can build some things to last forever, in quotes, obviously. But like those glasses that you buy one set and you've got them for life. But that's the problem, because styles change. I want different looking glasses, but now you've got those glasses. They've got to stay there and so on. We want to make it so that we have the ability to change things without losing some of the things that have to change.
I come back to the original question of this particular podcast as well, just to kind of wrap things up a little bit in this. The original question was the best way to capture your systems. And we've explored a lot of different ideas and things here, but definitively, if you're saying to businesses who want to get started on this process, are there some basics to get them started? Is there a piece of technology that they should use? How do you get it underway?
Okay. Biggest thing I would say is work with the people who do it. So it isn't one person going in the back room and sitting down and devising the best way to do it. Get the people who do it to be at the table and work on it together. You do want to have the business involved in that too. By the business, I mean someone who understands the business impact of changes, but get the people who do it together. Then the actual capturing of it, my recommendation is just use some Post-it notes, get a flip chart and put them up on the flip chart as you go. It's visual. The people sitting over there didn't have to hear you say it because they can see the step there. Because often when you're working with people, they'll all be talking. Make it so that the conversation goes through the Post-it notes, through the stickies, so that you capture one process that everyone's looking at. And then once you've got it, make sure that you go back and then assess it against those risks and benefits, which you would have hopefully written down at the beginning to make sure that you know what you're talking about. But we want to, at the end, say, all right, we said there's a risk that this could happen. Whereabouts in that process we've just captured have we managed that risk or achieved that benefit? And if you can go through doing that, you've got all the people have been involved. They love it because they can see this is real. They've all had a chance to say something. There's no, well, you should do it my way, because it's not my way now, it's our way. And you can do that very clearly with everybody involved. And then the next thing I would say, because this is how to do that, we've got everyone involved. We've captured the system, the process. We've made sure that we've checked that against the risks and the benefits. And the next thing is get it as quickly as you can, practically, put it into a form that is now going to be available to everybody. Because everybody loves it when they see the thing that was important to them yesterday made important again today. So they want to see that we captured that system yesterday, that process. And now here it is. And all the guys are able to do that. Yeah, we did that yesterday. Oh yeah, no, here, let me show you what I mean by that. And people take pride in that. People love it. So that would be my answer to the question. Get it out there. And then the other thing is work out how long it should be, how many runs or how many days, months or weeks or whatever before we should review it. The higher the risk or the higher the complexity, the shorter the review cycle or the shorter number of runs that you have to go through that shorter number of cycles.
Before you go, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're tuned to. Thank you for listening to the Systems from the Box podcast featuring John Tonkin from Brain in a Box. Details on how to contact John and his team are in the show notes, along with other valuable links you don't want to miss. This podcast is produced by Podcast Done For You. I'm Anthony Pearl. We look forward to your company on the next episode.